Tonight on Arise America, turbulent Tuesday. The stock market has a wild ride a day after an 1,100-point drop, the latest on what it all means. Trump dodging Mueller? A report says the president may not agree to an interview with the special counsel investigating the Russian matter. And Elon Musk's multi-billion-dollar space gamble. Will the SpaceX rocket make it to Mars? That and more next on Arise America. Welcome to Arise America. I'm Andrew Schmertz. It's Turnaround Tuesday on Wall Street, with investors' stomachs doing most of the turning. It was a wild ride, with the Dow Jones staging more than 1,000-point swing through the day. It opened down 500 points after a sell-off in the Asian markets and then came back to be up over 500 as buyers entered the market. For a time, the Dow was in correction territory as defined by a 10% drop off the highs, but now it pared its losses from yesterday by half. For the rest of the market swing through the day, both positive and negative territory. This followed yesterday's historic sell-off where the Dow dove more than 1,100 points. So let's take a look at the final numbers. The Dow finished the day up 569.12, and most of that happened in the last 90 minutes to close at 24,914. The S&P 500 also up, and the NASDAQ up better than 2% at 148.36. Sam Stovall is the chief equity strategist at CFRA Equity and Strategy. Here's what he had to say.
Strong. We're looking for 18% earnings growth for the S&P 500 in 2018. We expect to see real GDP rise by more than 3% this year versus a sub 2.5% growth in 2017. So I don't see a recession on the horizon, and as a result, I don't think we're going to be morphing into a bear market.
To help digest all of this is Gabe Borestein from Enclave Capital, the senior managing director. Gabe, welcome back to Arise. It's good to see you again. So let's start with the big picture. What happened over the last 2 days?
I think basically what happened in the past 2 days, my opinion, is the explosive end result of ongoing and persistent warning from the market gurus about, and some Fed officials, about potential of a market correction.
So the Fed official would be Janet Yellen, who gave an interview on Monday, a former Fed official.
She had issued many warnings to the markets in the past. However, the most relevant catalyst seems to be the GDP data, which reflected 2.3% growth in 2017, which is better than 1.6% attained in 2016. However, it missed the Fed's objective and historical average growth of 3% by a mile.
What about the specter of inflation? You know, we hear, you can turn off yourself. Oh, that's okay.
I apologize.
It's I think that was Steely Dan making an appearance.
I apologize. I truly apologize.
That's okay. The inflation issue. This is a double-edged sword. We talk about how great the economy is and earnings going, and then we say, oh my God, there's inflation. This is bad.
Basically, the Fed's target inflation, which would be one of the components that would justify the monetary reversal, is 2%. 2%. We have never attained that. The greatest inflationary risk is demand pull inflation, which is not a risk. Why? Simply because that would be driven by consumer demand. However, in 2017, consumer debt reached a record. Basically, even with the tax abatement and allegedly net increase in the wages of 2.3%.
So when you say this was an overreaction then by the market, somebody got spooked, and that this is a one-time event, and because the buyers came into the market today, that the market has been stabilized, and maybe we hit a bottom yesterday?
I cannot say that this is one-time event. All I'm saying is that the data is misinterpreted. It's not bullish. It's not inflationary. We are missing historical averages on a GDP growth. We are missing Fed's defined targets on the GDP growth and inflation, and the alleged unemployment data, which allegedly reflects full employment, is distorted by a major decline in labor force participation rate from 2007, where it stood at 66, now it's 62.7. On top of it, you have 5 million Americans working part-time involuntarily, which means they cannot find a full-time job.
So the unemployment numbers are a little bit skewed.
Misinterpreted.
Misinterpreted. Gabe, you're going to come back later in the show?
Sure.
Without your ringtone.
I
I
apologize.
think it was Leonard Skinner.
I apologize. Yes, I apologize.
That's okay, and we'll get back to you. But there's a lot more to talk to you about.
Sure.
The president likes to brag about how well the markets are doing, pointing out in the State of the Union address that record after record are falling. Now, on his watch, he does own a record for the single-day biggest point drop. That happened yesterday. But today on Capitol Hill, the administration said nothing to see here. Chief Washington correspondent Eric Ham has more on that and other stories from the Capitol. So the Treasury Secretary testified in front of the House Financial Committee today. He addressed the markets. What else happened, Eric?
That's right. Steve Mnuchin was here. He was in Washington. He was on the Hill. He was actually there meeting with the House Financial Services Committee. And let's take a listen to what he said, particularly the questioning that he got from Representative Carolyn Maloney of New York.
I think the fundamentals are quite strong. I have checked in with market participants this morning before I came to make sure that there was orderly market activity, clearance functioning, no systemic issues, and I'm happy to report that I got the green lights.
Well, do you believe, does this have financial stability implications?
No, I don't think these types of moves, given how much the market has rallied, do have financial stability concerns.
Well, the administration has claimed credit for the markets going up. Are they going to claim credit when the markets go down?
Again, I think we'll still claim credit for the fact that it's up over 30% since the election.
So as you see, the Secretary still believes that there's much to brag about. But with the markets, even though we've seen the largest sell-off yesterday, and we're still seeing what looks like a tremendous volatility in the markets, here in Washington, they're still doing a victory lap. Andrew?
All right, so Steve Bannon, he's back in the news. He's the gift that keeps on giving for this White House. He was supposed to testify in front of the House Intel Committee. He didn't show up. Eric, what can you tell us more about that?
That's right. He did not show up. Now, remember, he was just in front of this committee a couple of weeks ago, and in fact, he was the first person that the House Intel Committee actually got a subpoena for. He was actually before the committee for more than 10 hours, and he was supposed to return today, but he was a no-show. Now, we don't know if the committee is going to hold him in contempt for not showing up, but what we do know is he will be meeting with the Mueller probe next week, and he has agreed to cooperate with Bob Mueller's investigation and answer all of their questions. So the jury is still out, and we're waiting with bated breath with what he will say next week when he meets with Mueller and his team.
And traditionally, the special counsel sometimes coordinates with Congress, so they may not issue a subpoena or hold him in contempt. We'll have to see. So now more on the Russia probe. The New York Times is reporting that President Trump's lawyers are advising him to reject a face-to-face interview. We know that the president has stated he welcomes the opportunity to talk with the special counsel. Maybe his lawyers have some different ideas.
That's right. This could get much, much uglier. We do know, based on the president from his own words, that he is willing to meet with Bob Mueller and even meet with him under oath before the grand jury. However, we are getting reports that his legal team does not want the president anywhere near Bob Mueller and his investigation. They see it as a potential trap that the president could be charged with perjury because we do know that he has a penchant for saying and speaking a lot of untruth. In fact, the last time he was in a deposition, they recorded more than 30 times the president simply did not tell the truth. And so the concern is, we do know that lying to the FBI is against the law. And so they want to try to keep him as far away from Bob Mueller as they can. Now, there is legal precedent that suggests that if Mueller compels him to testify, he will have to. We do know that President Ronald Reagan has done so. Of course, Richard Nixon did, and as well President Bill Clinton. So if President Trump decides not to go forward with meeting with the special investigation, this will be the first time we will have seen this happen in history.
So now we have dueling memos. The Democratic memo, which passed through the Intel Committee yesterday, is in front of the president. He has 5 days to review it, and this relates to the Russia investigation. This memo allegedly counters the points in the Republican memo. Is there any idea of which way the president is leaning?
Well, actually, we do know that the president got the memo today, and in fact, many sources are saying that they are actually looking to release the memo. Now, we don't know if and when that will take place, and in fact, one thing that did not happen with the Nunes memo that we know is taking place with the Democratic memo is the president is actually looking for input from the FBI. Now, we do know that he pointedly made clear to tell his White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, to tell both the Department of Justice and the FBI to butt out of the Nunes memo, but we know he's actually actively looking for their input and their engagement on this particular memo. So we don't know when. We do know that he's got 5 days to review it and make a decision. Now, if by some chance that he decides not to release the memo, we do know that the Democrats are prepared to take the memo to the floor of the House for a vote for the full House to potentially override any veto that the president may offer. So we're still waiting to see what happens, but it's going to be good.
That would be pretty historic if that happens. We're 48 hours, and they can't do it if the government runs out of money. Maybe that's the plan here. 48 hours from now, the government runs out of money unless they can come up with a spending bill. Is there a threat of another government shutdown?
You know, if you had asked me earlier today, I would have said no. But the plot is thickening because we do know that today that there looks like there's an agreement between lawmakers in both chambers to actually keep the government open. But, and this is where the plot thickens, the president spoke today, and I'll just read to you exactly what he says. He said, if we don't get rid of these loopholes where killers are allowed to come into our country and continue to kill, if we don't change it, let's have a shutdown. We'll do a shutdown, and it's worth it for our country. I'd love to see a shutdown if we don't get this stuff taken care of. That's a direct quote from the President of the United States himself today. And in fact, Republican Congresswoman Barbara Comstock of Virginia, she pushed back against the president, saying that we've got members working on a deal and that we don't need a shutdown. Now, keep in mind, Representative Comstock is in a district where she is very vulnerable. She's got a lot of federal workers in her area, and so the president actually pushed back against her. So it was a very spirited debate that took place, something that we've never seen, where you had a member of the president's own party pushing back against the president on this issue. And so the question will remain, you know, will this actually happen? We do know that the spending bill that lawmakers are working on right now does not have the funding for the wall, which is what the president wants. So even if this bill actually gets through both chambers and gets to the president's desk, if it does not have the full funding for the wall, it sounds as though the president is saying he will not sign it, which then could lead to a potential shutdown.
Eric Ham in Washington. Every day, good drama from you, Eric. Coming up next, the view of the market turmoil for the average investors, and Girl Scouts, cookies, and a bridge named after an avowed racist. You're watching Arise America. Stay with us. Back now to the wild week on Wall Street so far, and it's just Tuesday. For most of us, the question is what to do as a regular long-term investor. Gabriel Borestein from Enclave Capital rejoins us. I want to start with something called the volatility index. We hear all this about, quote, volatility, and people throw it out without necessarily understanding it. We have a chart of what's known as the VIX. It's the index that measures volatility. Explain to us how volatility factor into this market, and it's really a fear chart, correct?
Yes, basically it's a measure of anticipated 30-day volatility based on S&P 500 options. Volatility index reflects many variables. One of them could be fear, but it also it is anticipatory of probability of other variables, geopolitical duress, some economic unexpected jolt, etc.
Do you think it's a valuable index because we keep hearing it and seeing it, and if you keep telling people enough that this line here means total fear, sell everything, that people start to panic? Because I got a sense that that's what took over the markets yesterday.
It was contributory to what transpired. From my perspective, because of the rapidly changing environment with its economic, geopolitical, diversity of opinions and perceptions, I think volatility index is actually a dangerous tool to utilize.
Yeah,
that's my personal opinion.
And people actually trade this tool, which maybe even more affects that.
They bet on volatility itself, that will go up or go down.
Okay, let's talk about the average investor who has their retirement funds in the market. The traditional response has been take a breath, sit back, because if you sold yesterday, you lost out on about a 50% recovery today. Is that still the basic message you would tell people, long-term investors?
I would say that this is my perspective, there are two variables from my perspective that allow to sustain this unprecedented stock market rally from 2009, ignoring warnings from various Fed officials.
We're in an 8-year bull market.
Yes.
Don't get, President Trump talks about everything about his administration.
But I'm just giving you a little bit broader perspective.
Yeah.
So basically, since 2009, we have incredible rally sustained in spite of the warnings by geopolitical risks, which have a sort of which profile the United States as the global safe haven. And obviously,
there's not much competition for people's money.
That is correct. That is the most logical, answer. Plus, we also have a very sustained and very moderate recovery, which had prevented the Fed from raising rates to the point where you could end up with a cyclical decompression, as we've seen in history many times.
Well, there's been accusations that the Federal Reserve created what we call an asset bubble, that part of the booming stock market was the result of artificial money, or real money, but artificially pumped into the economy through all the quantitative easing, what we know as a stimulus. They're now pulling that back because the economy is better. Is that an accurate statement?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think the magnitude of a great recession was underestimated, and we're dealing with a new normal. The new normal requires and demands a very facilitating monetary policy, which demands extremely low interest rates from historical perspective in order to sustain economic momentum. So that's very important.
So we shouldn't be spooked because interest rates remain low, obviously, if you look at the 20-year, 30-year history. So should you say to investors, don't get spooked by rising interest rates right now?
Let me just preface this.
Okay.
In spite of unprecedented monetary, aggressive monetary facilitation and all the fiscal stimuli in place, we sustained, from historical perspective, extremely moderate economic progress, even as reflected by 2.3% GDP growth in 2017. From my perspective, I don't see that as a bubble. I don't see that as a risk. However, being a senior managing director for Enclave, I would not want to give individual investor decisions on a market investments. The only thing I could say is I don't see anything on the horizon which could possibly dramatically change the current market upside, which demands, again, monetary facilitation and sustained economic marginal growth as we had.
And for the record, I mean, 2.5% growth, if we hit 3% growth, many people may see that as historically low, but we're in an extremely mature, complicated economy in the United States in large. I'm not sure how much growth we can get. I mean, there's a Fed report that says we could have 5.5% growth this quarter. That seems to me pretty ambitious.
In the fourth quarter, several federal districts had indicated potential GDP fourth quarter growth between 3.5% to 4%. the posted GDP growth for the fourth quarter was only 2.6. So I'm not really impressed by these models indicating forward projection of the GDP growth. The 3% growth is a historical GDP growth since 1948. In this recovery, we had failed to attain it in spite of all the aggressive monetary policies and other fiscal stimuli. And I would say, again, that reverts to a new norm, result of the unquantifiable damage inflicted on the U.S. economy by the Great Recession.
For general investors, all we talk about is stocks. There are a lot of other things to invest in, and bonds are among them, especially for people who are on fixed incomes. Yes. Now, the bond market is getting routed, but interest rates are going up. Should investors who are not well balanced in their portfolio start thinking about being serious about balance?
Again, I don't want to
give...
my perspective is that inflation is not a risk in this continuous cyclical sustained economic momentum. As long as that is the case, and given the magnitude of geopolitical pressures, meaning external issues, we could see a global convergence, flight to quality into U.S. Treasuries.
Into Treasuries.
And that could prop up and induce a major rally in U.S. Treasuries still.
And still, even with U.S. Treasury prices?
Absolutely. There was a correction to around 2.82 on the 10-year Treasuries. We rebounded to about 2.74. From my perspective, any external issue as reflected by North Korean threat of nuclear weapon, you could see.
That's right. There's always a political threat that
could see
upsets
10-year
the apple
Treasury
cart.
rallying right to 2%.
Sure. When we talk about inflation, we hear a lot of economists refer to what we see as wage inflation, which is the same thing as saying people are getting pay raises. At what point, and is there a point where that does tip into an inflationary environment? The White House, chairman of the White House Economic Council today, advisors, said that he does not believe, as an economist, that wage inflation results in inflation. It's obviously good to have that view if you're the Trump administration, because you want to see people's wages rise through tax cuts and whatever else they're providing.
In 2017, the wages have increased 2.3%. Adjusted for inflation, that's a very marginal increase. U.S. consumer entered 2018 facing with a record personal debt, and I believe that even if you had a higher real wage increases, and remember 18 states had implemented raising the minimum wages, I believe that the most logical resolution will be for the U.S. consumer to address their debt issues.
And stop spending.
I would say we are facing a risk of contracted spending given the financial limitations imposed on the U.S. consumer.
And possible deflation?
I believe, in fact, deflation is the real risk because if a global economy entered turmoil, and we could precipitate this, you're going to see OPEC cartel quotas falling. You could see oil prices decline, and that would be prelude to a major disinflationary trend.
And rising interest rates and deflation, a bad combination.
The rates would decline in a major way.
Gabe, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, call it the Thin Mint assault. Hundreds of Girl Scouts from across Georgia converged on the state capitol today with milk and cookies to convince lawmakers to change the name of a bridge. The bridge into Savannah honors the former segregationist governor Eugene Talmadge. His racist views so extreme that he once ran on a platform advocating Southern segregation, white supremacy, and racism in the state university system. The girls want the legislature to rename the bridge after Girl Scout founder Juliette Gordon Lowe, who started the organization in Savannah more than a century ago. But as the cookie crumbles, it might take more than Thin Mints. The sponsor of the bill to rename the bridge notes that it's an election year and is doubtful that the Republican-controlled legislature would risk angering their conservative base. Coming up, it's launch day for the SpaceX Heavy Falcon. We'll show you what happened next on Arise America. The immigration debate continues on Capitol Hill as two senators unveiled a bipartisan compromise today that would protect dreamers and also boost security on the Mexican border. But President Trump has dismissed it as saying any deal needs to fund his border wall. Joining us now to discuss these latest developments is longtime immigrant activist Ravi Ragbir, who is also the executive director of the New Sanctuary Coalition. Ragbir has fought for thousands of people facing detention and deportation, and he himself could be deported this week for a 2002 wire fraud conviction for which he has already served time. Welcome, Ravi, and thank you for joining us. Let's start with the political news out of Washington. Senators McCain and Senators Kuhn, Republican, Democrat, have come up with this proposal to sort of codify what's known as DACA, the Dreamers, in exchange for some additional funding on the southern wall. The president says they're wasting their time. Any thoughts about what's going on right now?
Well, unfortunately, we have never expected any form of compromise on this. In November 9, 2016, all of these programs, TPS and DACA, we expected this administration to slash, and they have done so. And the only reason that we have seen DACA still on the table is because of the great mobilization by the community to protect the young people who are in this crisis. So there may be a bipartisan deal from McCain and Coons, but is this going to go anywhere? I don't expect anything to come out of it, especially as he's so firm on the border wall, which is going to cost billions of dollars, and which, even though he said he's going to send a bill to Mexico, seriously, are we going to get that?
Well, let me ask you something. Would you support it? And I've heard some Democrats say, heck, they'll agree to the border wall of some form if they get the Dreamers protected. Is that something that the immigrant community would support?
In fact, the border wall will not solve the problem. So looking at it from that point of view, yes, we could support a border wall. I'm not saying I will support a border wall, but if you're thinking the border wall is going to support any type of policy, good immigration policy, it's not going to help. The problem though is not just the border wall, but what the militarization on the border wall, which is the drones. I was in Arizona recently, and you saw the military aircrafts taking off every half an hour just to monitor what is happening on the border.
There's about 122 immigrants, from what I understand, will lose their DACA protection every single day. If DACA expires, what do you think the community is going to do? Are they going to go back underground, or are they they're going to face deportation? So what is their outlook?
The outlook is bleak. They expect to be taken in by this agency, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, because they are going after the low-hanging fruit. They have all the information of these people, every single DACA recipient, beneficiary, over 800. So they would expect 800,000, 800,000, expect to be taken away. The good news is they still have legal options. The New Sanctuary Coalition has a training for how to protect themselves, how to protect their families, so that they are not deported under this administration.
You have a fascinating story. You were born in Trinidad,
correct,
but have lived here for 30 years. Your wife and daughter are U.S. citizens. Back in 2002, I understand, you faced a wire fraud conviction for working with a mortgage company, I understand.
Correct.
Right? But you served your time.
Correct.
Then you faced deportation. And now you face deportation again. Where does your case stand?
So my lawyers, and I have really good lawyers from the New York University Immigrant Rights Clinic, who have been looking at my case and looking at the options available. And they are seeing options available. In fact, there's a hearing on Friday to look at the underlying criminal conviction that makes me deportable. I have a green card. Well, I had a green card. But because of the
You were here legally.
I was here with a green card.
Right.
I don't like to use the word legally and illegally because for a piece of paper, it doesn't make me any less of a human.
Right.
So they are looking to challenge the underlying conviction. Yet, that's on February 9th. This is this Friday. On February 10th, I am told to go to immigration to turn myself in to face deportation, not allowing the court any time to look at this, not to allow the court any time to make a decision on this. They're hoping that the judge will not make a decision, but they think that they will be allowed to take me away because they assume that the stay that the court has issued is going to expire.
Now, you were at the State of the Union address.
Correct.
That's pretty neat. How did that come around? And, what was the reaction of lawmakers when you were there? Did you get a chance to speak to anybody, specifically speak to anybody from the other side?
So, yeah, it was bizarre. Monday night, I was in detention. On Tuesday night, I was
in Congress.
Yes. And in the halls, right? So it wasn't just, we expected that I would just be there to accompany Congresswoman Velasquez, who has been supportive of me. We were fortunate enough to get a ticket through Congresswoman Clark, who is also supportive. We did not meet anyone on the other side. Unfortunately, we didn't have time because this all happened in minutes. But I did speak with Senate Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi.
Okay, of the House.
Of the House. So we
the House Minority Leader.
House, and so she expressed concern and support for my situation. But it was very bizarre. It was like I was in a different reality, looking at this out-of-body experience. Why I'm in the State of the Union, listening to the person who is basically authorizing my deportation and the breakup of my family.
Was there anything in the president's speech to either give you hope or to make you more fearful?
There was nothing in there to give me hope, was there? Because he didn't address anything positive about the immigrant community. What he has shown is that he wants to criminalize the immigrant population, basically describing them as gang members, as the MS-13, that we equating every single immigrant to the gangs, and therefore violence, and therefore we should be deported, not recognizing the work that people have put in, the valuable contributions they have made in the communities in New York City as much as everywhere else.
And by the way, you're getting support across the board. Just yesterday, you were awarded the Bishop's Cross by the Episcopal Diocese of Long Island.
Correct.
For, quote, exceptional service to the church and to the community it services. What does that mean for you, and do you think it helps maybe your case a little bit as well?
So they went one more step further than that. They actually made me a canon to the bishop, which is an advisory to the bishop, and is the highest offer they can give to an unordained person. It means that I am now come under the protection, the actual protection of the Episcopal Diocese. So we don't know what it means, but we know that the diocese, the Episcopalian Long Island Diocese, Bishop Provenzano, has expressed support. We are trying to figure out how this would affect my case.
Religious leaders have generally spoken about pro-immigration positions, but do you think that they have been vocal enough in this country at this specific time to protect immigrants?
Not enough people are doing this. So there have been those who are speaking out strongly about it. What we need to see is the Catholics, for instance, not the bishops, but more the Catholic churches, individual churches that have to speak up about the issue, about the concern that their own congregants face, and look to create process to protect them. We need to have more of those faith leaders stand up to protect the immigrant population, not the other way around, where we see the faith leaders are saying, evangelists who are saying that immigrants should be removed, but they will be excited to say we have missionaries to those places. Why not protect the people who are here from those countries who you talk about needing to have missionaries to convert and to share the good news?
Okay, Ravi Ragbir, good luck this Friday.
Thank you.
From the New Sanctuary Coalition. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Still to come, family leave marks a milestone. You're watching Arise America. was quite a sight. The liftoff for the SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket on its maiden voyage today, opening a new chapter in space travel. It's simply the world's biggest rocket. The rocket is designed to carry 140,000 weight payloads in low Earth orbit, or a lighter load, all the way to Mars. With us now is Mordecai Mark Mac Lowe. He is a curator of astrophysics at the American Museum of Natural History here in New York City. Mordecai, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks.
We should say this is Elon Musk's big day. He is a South African. Tell us a little bit about what Elon has riding on this and why he consistently keeps trying, because he first had the big explosion a few years ago, but he's had some successes, today being the big one.
Well, he's trying to do something quite astonishing. He's trying to lower the cost of getting into space by a factor of 10, and that changes everything, if he can do it. This is the next step in his mission to do that, and it also is bringing him another step closer to what may be a fantastical goal of starting human civilization on Mars. I'll take a 10 times cost reduction and be very happy.
And that alone. He's also delivering a car to Mars. I think a Tesla is on board.
He's delivering a car into solar orbit, looping out as far as Mars, coming back in, looping out.
Is this rocket going into that loop towards Mars?
So the payload and probably they'll just release the payload into that full loop, but the upper stage may go along, I'm not sure.
And what's key to reducing the cost, I understand, and amazing, is the booster rockets, is it? The booster rockets? They usually fall into the ocean.
And get thrown away. He's recycling them. He is landing them like some 1950s science fiction, landing them on legs back where they started, taking them to the factory, cleaning them up a little, and putting them back on the launch pad.
And was that successful today?
As far as we know the two of them, the two that were coming back to Cape Canaveral, landed successfully, beautifully, in synchrony, both coming down, utterly astonishing. The one that the central booster that went further and had to come down in the ocean, it made it as far as the barge, smoke billowed up. I haven't heard yet if it landed successfully. As far as we know, it did.
How much of an investment is Musk putting into this? And he's not scared to spend money. We know that.
This is true. The entire SpaceX enterprise is now a $20 billion company, but a lot of that is now coming in from outside investors now that he's demonstrated that he can do something. I think he's probably put a couple of billion in, though.
Why does the United States need an immigrant to take over its space program? Where is NASA in all of this?
Well,
and there's more than one immigrant. There's Richard Branson as well, who's British.
Yes. So NASA is a political enterprise.
Right.
It's controlled by the U.S. Congress. When Congress provides the funding and the political will, NASA can do astonishing things. The Apollo space program, where in 8 years we went from go to a person walking around on the moon.
With computer technology less powerful than people have in their iPhone.
Than what's in my pocket,
right.
Yeah. But since that era, NASA has become much more of a, this is a necessary service of government, let's keep it rolling over, but it's not something where we point it in one direction and say, go do that. It's more, we go out and say, there are all these things that need doing in space. Hey, NASA, would you mind doing all these different things?
Is there a political risk here in the sense that Musk and SpaceX services are being sold, right? You can hire Elon Musk and SpaceX to deliver your satellite, and you could be China, and you can be, I'm not sure, you could, if there's any limitations. But is that a national security risk that we're maybe turning over too much of our space program?
I would say that having an American-based company launching satellites for the world, that's a big gain for our economy. And if we're launching them, it's the customer's, if you will, security risk that someone might open up the cover and look inside the satellite.
That's a good point. We shouldn't leave NASA out altogether. We got pictures earlier last week of these amazing pictures of Mars because only NASA has been able to send an actual thing built on Earth to another planet. The rovers, I think it's only more NASA, right?
I'm pretty sure the European Space Agency has gotten things to Mars. And of course, China recently got a rover to the moon. And you know, the Russians have landed things on Venus, which is quite an amazing feat given the high pressure, high temperature environment. It's, you know, worse than putting something inside an oven. So, you know, humans have gotten to other planets. What's astonishing here is that this is the first time that a private company has done this and is approaching the scale of the biggest rocket ever built, which is the Saturn V.
Okay, that's right. And so with Musk's rocket and Falcon rocket, what is the immediate goals that he has in this orbital loop around Mars?
Right.
Is it to say, hey, a private company can do it?
His immediate goal, actually, is to demonstrate that he can get this rocket off the ground without blowing it up.
He even said today that there was about a 50-50 chance.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, computer simulations are very good, but if you have an error in your simulation, you want to test it. And this was the test. And turns out the simulations were right. He's put enough reinforcement in. It didn't come apart. It didn't rip the central booster apart when you had these two side boosters lifting off. And it worked, which is wonderful.
Which is astounding. So what is the next step for this rocket? It is headed somewhere, right?
Yeah. So this rocket in particular, it's a test article. Okay. Now that he's shown he can launch it successfully, now he can go out and say, you have something little you want to launch? I'll stack it up on top of 5 other little things and we'll launch it, and I'll give you a price that you won't get from anybody else. If you have something big you want to launch, I can do it and nobody else can. So now he's got a commercial
business.
Yeah, and he can also say, okay, now I want to start pushing my vision of, you know, actually getting things first into orbit around Mars, then down, then making this a human-rated rocket. And of course, there's the BFR on the horizon.
Yeah, will it be a private entity or NASA or some other government agency that will first take humans to Mars, do you think?
That is a very interesting question, isn't it? Right now, Musk is building a private capability to do it, but it's still going to be an extremely expensive enterprise, and it's not clear who would actually pay for it. Does he take that out of the profits of a private company? Can he do that? Well, as long as it's privately owned, I suppose he can say, yes, we are going to devote our profits to something that is not necessarily going to give us a short-term return. If he goes public with SpaceX, do his investors allow him to do that? I don't know.
Well, there may be people willing to spend $20–30 million for a seat. Let me ask you about Branson's project real quickly.
Sure.
Is he going to get people into space, as he has been saying for several years now?
Again, this launch is kind of a proof of concept that at this point private companies are building capabilities comparable to NASA. We may be able to get a set of human-rated private vehicles. We don't have them yet. And human rating, that is getting a vehicle where everybody checks off and says, yeah, this is safe enough to put a person on it, it's really probably not going to blow up, maybe. That's something that is yet another level of complexity compared to everything that he's done so far. But he's done a lot so far, so he's on track. And Branson is on track. I won't say they're going to make it, but they're on track.
Mordecai Mark Macklow from the American Museum of Natural History. This is fascinating stuff. We could talk about this all day. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
That's Arise America for this Tuesday. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Good night.